Hello everyone, we are Matta and I'm Huarte, and today we're going to talk about a research carried out by Maurizio Gentilucci and Giovanna Cristina Campione. They tried to prove that there exists a relationship between hand and mouth movement and that this has affected the development of language. We will focus on the results and the conclusion they presented in the paper From Action to Speech from 2013, belonging to the second section of the book Language and Action in Cognitive Neuroscience. But we will also comment on some other findings they presented on previous papers. Now, so as to better understand the theory we will present, we will first make a review on some previous knowledge that will become useful to follow our explanations. The primary motor cortex, which is in the frontal lobe, resides in front of the central fissure in a long band called the motor strip in Brodmann area 4, which is also referred to as homunculus. The distortion of the map depends on the degree to which we have fine motor control of a body part. This area is the final exit point for neurons responsible for the fine motor control of the body's muscles. Broca's area is a classic anterior language-related region, typically treated as comprising the par opercularis BA44 and par triangularis BA45 in the inferior frontal gyrus. It is involved in the sequencing of a set of movements to perform an action, syntax, and the articulation of speech sounds, among others.
Another concept that we want to review is that of mirror neurons, which are also present in primates. These neurons become active when an animal executes an action and when it observes the same action performed by another animal. In area F5 in the monkey's brain, the mirror neuron system demonstrated to be activated primarily for the observation of reaching and grasping, although it also maps the sound of certain movements onto the execution of those movements, for example cracking nuts and lip smacking. The presence of these neurons in a monkey's premotor area suggests that facial gestures may indeed be transitional between visual gesture and speech. In monkeys, the cortical mirror neuron circuit is formed by two main regions, the rostral part of the inferior parietal lobe and the ventral premotor cortex. Mirror neurons' activity is involved in representing actions. The ability to match the observation of a certain action with its execution makes it possible to recognize the meaning and the aim of actions performed by another individual. Therefore, thanks to the visual mirror system and the link between actor and observer, it is possible to say that mirror neurons have played a role in the development of a gestural communication system.
That's that for the review. Let's move on to the presentation of the paper From Action to Speech. The authors of this paper start by presenting two alternative views on the relationship between gesture and speech. One of them proposes that there are two different systems and that gesture functions as an auxiliary support system that comes particularly useful when oral communication is disrupted or impeded. The other view claims that both gesture and speech conform to one single system of communication linked to the same thought processes. Following this second theory, Gentilucci and colleagues propose that manual gestures and speech share the same control circuit, and thus they influence one another. They base their hypothesis on evidence that speech may be a gestural system rather than an acoustic one. This theory asserts that communication first started in primates as a gestural system, and it gradually evolved into an oral one. Such evolution was possible thanks to a shared neural circuit controlling both arm and mouth movement, which was developed in relation to gesture activities.
So, what the authors are trying to prove is the effect that the relational interaction between hand and mouth command systems may have had on language evolution. They had already proved in previous studies that there is a bidirectional relationship between finger and lip aperture. This means that, for example, when grabbing an object, the mouth is predisposed to accommodate according to the size of the object grabbed. So, the bigger the object, the more open the mouth will be. Authors hypothesized, then, that this relation had an effect on language developing. They propose that words naming objects, and in particular the vowels of those words, match the sizes of the actual objects in the real world. In the same way, adjectives describing sizes have a correlation of sound and sizes. So, closed vowels are associated with small objects, and open vowels to large ones. This is exemplified in the adjectives large and little. Having proved all that, in this paper, the authors focus on the specific function of mirror neurons and their role in language development and acquisition. During the research, many experiments were carried out to test how the mirror neurons affect language production. Here, we will only explain two of them, presenting a summary of all the results obtained and the conclusions the authors could infer.
In a TMS study, that is to say, transcranial magnetic stimulation study, stimulation was applied to tongue motor cortex of participants, silently reading a syllable and simultaneously observing different video clips. Those video clips showed actors grabbing objects of different sizes, a big and a small one, first with their hands and then with their feet. Then, actors pantomiming the two types of grasps, and finally, the differently sized objects presented alone. The results showed that tongue MIPs, that is to say, motor evoked potential, were greater when observing power grasps, that is, grasping the bigger object, while precision grasps, that is, grasping the smaller object, showed lesser activation, as you can see in the graphic. This was true both when watching either the action executed or pantomime with the hands. In contrast, the observation of the objects alone and the type of foot interaction with the objects did not affect tongue MIPs. These results showed that the observation of manual and mouth actions directed to an object activated sectors of the Broca's area and premotor areas, whereas the observation of transitive foot actions activated only a dorsal sector of the premotor area. With this experiment, the authors proved that there is an extra connection between hand and mouth, which is not activated when there is foot manipulation.
Another of the experiments carried out intended to show the effects of the execution and observation of the bringing to the mouth action on vocalizations. So, participants were asked to produce the syllable ba while grasping an object and taking it to the mouth, or while observing someone else doing it. The object brought to the mouth was either a cherry, small object, or an apple, large object. Besides, participants were asked to produce a sound unrelated to the Italian language while executing the action. In the upper images, we can see the execution effects. In picture A, the participant executed the action and simultaneously pronounced the syllable ba, while in B, emitted a vocalization unrelated to Italian. In the lower images, we can see the observation effects. In all of them, the participants observed the actor shown in the pictures while pronouncing the syllable ba. In C, the actor was actually executing the bringing to the mouth action. In D, he was only doing a pantomime, that is to say, he was not actually grasping any object. And in E, he was doing the pantomime of the action with a non-biological arm. In the graphics below the images, we can see the variation of mouth position when pronouncing the sounds. The grey bars represent mouth movement with a cherry, and the black ones the mouth movement with the apple. The F1 charts show which was the lips aperture, close or open, while the F2 charts show the tongue position, front or back. In general, this experiment demonstrated that the execution of bringing the apple to the mouth induced an increase in F2 as compared to the action executed with the cherry when pronouncing the syllable ba. But the action did not affect a vocalization unrelated to Italian, which means that the effect of an action is specific to language. On the other hand, and most importantly, this experiment proved that the observation of the action and even the observation of a pantomime of the action induced the same effect as the execution of the action itself.
It is possible to say that the experiments carried out provoked that a hand-mouth command system exists and has been a first step towards the evolution of language as we know it today. The localization of mirror neurons in the premotor area allowed the incorporation of gestures into the communicational system, which eventually evolved into words. The authors propose that communication then started as pantomimes of gestures that could be interpreted thanks to the presence of mirror neurons that not only observed the action but also provoked an activation of the motor cortex in the observer. In particular, and due to the dual hand-mouth motor command system exhibited in Broca's area, mirror neurons affect both movement and speech. The presence of mirror neurons allowed language to move from the gestural stage to the speech stage. This was due to the possibility to observe and execute actions, as well as to reshape the vocal tract to fit different sized objects. This, in turn, had an effect on the first vocalizations that later evolved into words.
The authors we've been discussing propose that the mirror system coupled with the double hand-mouth command system are involved in children's language acquisition. This hypothesis is in accordance with the strict relationship between early speech and symbolic gestures. In babies, for example, canonical babbling is accompanied by rhythmic hand movements. Manual gestures can also predict later success in the two-word level production and comprehension. The authors agree with Vygotsky's theory that when infants are experiencing the emergent lexicon phase, the manipulation of objects of different sizes may be used as a pre-verbal form of object identification and then, transformed into vocalization, used to communicate with other individuals. Taking this into account, we believe that these findings can become useful in particular when teaching early learners. As other theories and methods have already pointed out, manipulation of objects seems to be an advantage when acquiring a second language. So being in contact with objects can help learners not only to enhance language acquisition through the multimodality approach, that is, using all their senses, but apparently it may also help them to acquire sound production and pronunciation. On the other hand, as the authors propose that there is a relation between hand movements and the rhythm of the language, we think that when teaching toddlers, it could be useful to incorporate the use of hands to signal the beats, that is, the stressed syllables, while speaking, in order to acquire the rhythmic pattern characteristic of the English language.